This is World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with your host, Carl Gruber. World Awakenings is a podcast dedicated to opening your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how they play an all-important role in our daily life. So join Carl on this enlightening experience as he interviews metaphysical and spiritual experts to discuss, debate, and delve deeply into the hows and whys of this worldwide awakening.
Welcome to the World Awakenings podcast. But before we start, I'd like to tell you about my very special ebook I wrote called The 3 Pillars, a simple 3-step process to manifest positive and permanent change in your life. This concise 32-page 3-pillar ebook will teach you how to become a successful and consistent co-creator of your life path with the law of attraction. Yes, you can manifest the life you truly desire. And this ebook is absolutely free. Simply scan the QR code you now see on the screen or click on the link you see below in the show notes and get your free download today. The 3 Pillars ebook, written by me, Carl Gruber, will positively change your life. Download your copy today. Hey, welcome once again to the show that is your online voice for asking the question, why now more than ever are the people of the world awakening to all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening? Now, it's not just a phenomenon, it is the reality of today's world. Humankind has discovered that there is much, much more to their lives than the chaos, lack, attack, judgment, and wars that are presented to us on our TV screens. Instead, the truth is that of the opposite. Love, joy, truth, happiness, and abundance are our birthright and our inheritance as the divine higher self that we really are. So this is why we have only the best teachers, experts, masters, and purveyors of all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening on this show. So to help us wake up to the truth and reality of the love, light, and unity that there is now waiting for us. And I love that. I love it so much. And with that, it's time to check in with our featured guest. First, let me tell you about Aaron French. He is a psychic medium, Akashic reader, and spiritual practitioner for over 30 years with a deep non-dual foundation rooted in the Daoist teachings. Aaron created a grounded and heart-centered container within the Akashic Records and messages from our guides and angels, which are revealed. During a deep period of awakening in 2019, Aaron started receiving increasingly frequent messages from his own ancestors, as well as a constellation of spirit guides and higher angels, all of whom communicate through him with the sole purpose of encouraging our collective awakening. They have shared the deep truth of our unity with the universe, and that right now is a period of powerful transformation within the Earth's energy field, and we know that. And with that, Aaron, I am so grateful to have you here. Welcome, man.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Well, I'm already jealous. You told me you live way out in the beautiful Sierra Nevada mountains near Lake Tahoe. That's just got to be beautiful to live there.
It's beautiful, and also, the lake is one of the deepest lakes in the world, and it's this beautiful deep cauldron then of energy, of spiritual energies, and it's surrounded by these high mountains of the Sierras, so it's a really potent place to live. A lot of deep nature and connection, and a really deep conduit to all things. Yeah, it's a great place to live.
Sounds almost like Sedona, Arizona.
It's its own different version, maybe a bit colder, but yes, a bit snowier.
Vortex of energy. But let's find out now about you. Knowing what you do now as a medium, Akashic Records reader, and spiritual practitioner, I saw that you evidently made a living that was deeply involved within the corporate world. And that's quite a transition you made from that phase of your life to where you're now. Can you fill us in on some of those details on that big change?
Yeah, absolutely. For years, I've done a bunch of things in my life. First, I was a scientist for many years. I was a tropical biologist living in the jungles. I was a photographer. I became a chef for about a decade plus. I got an MBA and then moved into like food, the food world, but like the big food, corporate food supply chain and operations. Became a COO. All the while that was happening, I was on my own spiritual journey of awakening, unfolding, and connecting. And the last handful of years before I made this shift, I had started to mentor people, work with people individually on the spiritual path, and teach a few workshops, as well as I started to receive messages from spirit guides, angels, et cetera, for other people. Initially, they would come through to me really strongly and they like energetically tap me on the shoulder and say, like, hey, would you please pass this message to so and so that because they're not listening to me, kind of thing. And sometimes it would be people I knew well and I was happy to do it. And sometimes it'd be like loose friends who I was like, I don't really know them that well, but okay, I guess I'll do it. Um, and it usually actually was received really well, actually always. Um, and then I was getting the pull increasingly for years to just like, okay, turn away from this corporate work, which, I was really good at, but also increasingly unfulfilled with. Um, you know, doing multi-million dollar big negotiations and flying around the country, negotiating in boardrooms and making deals and doing these things. It's all exciting on a surface level, but it didn't feed my soul. And so, finally, my job ended. The company I was with wasn't doing great. I was laid off. And that was when I decided, oh, okay. Again, I had been receiving these messages to go deeper into my soul purpose for years and sort of paying half attention to it. And so when I was laid off, I just said, okay, I'm going to double down. I'm going to commit full time to supporting my own spirit journey as well as working with others as my full path. I'm not going to fall back on another corporate job, and I'm all in. And it wasn't the easiest transition, but the unfolding, the deepening, the connection, the love, the expansion that occurs when we just trust and go all in on what we know to be our path is magically, unbelievably amazing. And I recommend it for everyone. But once we learn and are aligned and build the skills and where we are, make that jump, and your life will unfold in ways you can't even imagine.
Boy, what a classic example. So you're a COO of a corporation and you get laid off, and a lot of people just, well, I'm just going to go find another job. But to take that, what seemed like, classic line, taking lemons and making lemonade out of it, most people get to the end of their life now, never following the commitment to their life purpose.
And I'll say, absolutely, that's the experience for many, many, many people. And certainly, a generation ago, like my parents and even before that, the energy wasn't as potent for awakening as it is now. So the fact is, right now is the time when all of us who are a little bit awake. There are some people who aren't awake and they're just living their life, and that's perfectly fine as well. But for those of us who are feeling the call, who are waking up, who are feeling this connection to the greater currents of energy happening right now,
Mhm.
this is the time to find your alignment and make that leap. Do it in a responsible, respectful way for you, but dig into it and do that. And this is the time when it's more available for us now to feel these energies and to leap into them. And all of us who are waking up now, this is how I'm shown, just to jump into this, is that we're awakening now to step into our purpose to support and guide and mentor and encourage the next folks to do it as well, who are coming up shortly. And then they're going to mentor more and more people. And pretty soon we have this cascade of, I can support hundreds or maybe thousands of people, I don't know, over this time. And then they can support thousands and then millions of people. And then they can support, boom. And all of a sudden we have this massive expansion. So for all of us awakening now, it's almost our purpose and birthright right now to put these voices out, to have a podcast, to work with people one-on-one, to in whatever way we do, whatever is our magic, whatever is our purpose, to share that with the world so that the next generation of awakening can also occur.
Yeah, 50, 60 years ago, I could see, you're a teenager out of high school and go, Mom and Dad, I decided to be a medium and Akashic Records reader. And they go, no, you're not. You're going to be a doctor. You're going to be a lawyer.
100%. And even growing up, right? So all the lessons and the teachers of the masters of the days of yore, or even concurrent, were all there's a few solitary, mostly men in the mountains in a cave, somewhere far away, right? That was the mythology that we grew up with, that I grew up with. And that's not the case anymore, right? Awakening, connecting spiritually, coming into our power. It doesn't have to be some distant, faraway thing for the very few. That was the olden paradigm. That was the old paradigm. We're moving into a new age. We're on the inflection point of this new energy. And now the energy is all of us everywhere right now have access and are increasingly connecting and deepening into the vastness of our experience, our birthright, our connection with all things across all realms.
I'm really curious. As a kid, did you have any inkling? Did you have any paranormal or spiritual experiences as a kid that might have tipped you off that this was going to be your path?
I mean, yes and no. I had my parents were sort of turned their back on society a little bit and was the end of the hippie era. And so, like, when I was very little, I grew up in some communes and ran around. And I actually didn't go to normal school until fourth grade. So I did go to a school. Now we would sort of call it like unschooling, where we didn't really have a curriculum. We mostly ran around with a collective of our friends and just did what we wanted. I did, though, in that school, people were brought in, and I did learn about like auras and how to like as kids, we learned how to like cut auras to decrease people's power and then how to lovingly repair them to encourage more connection and power in ourselves. For example, I learned Braille and sign language, but I couldn't really read very well and I couldn't do any math kind of thing. So I had that really wild and free childhood until fourth grade. So I do know, for example, for those of you watching on YouTube, I knew that I had some magic and I didn't really know what it was, but I knew I had some magic. And I would push my finger into the corner of my eyes. I'd close my eyes and push my finger right here into the corner of my eyes, and a little like blue orb of light would appear in both of my eyes. And
Hmm.
for whatever reason, I don't know where I got this at all. I don't remember, but I just knew that if I saw that blue light when I pushed my fingers into the corners of my eyes, that I still had my magic and the world was good. I just knew, oh, I'm still magic. The world is good. I'm still connected. That was um, now, when I went to school, fourth grade, it was literally as if I was an alien dropping into sort of normal modern society. Like I was raised very free and different, and I wasn't, I didn't know the simple things like you had to raise your hand and to talk or go to the bathroom or how to, I could barely read. I couldn't do mathematics at all. I'm lucky that I have a decent brain and I was able to catch up, but it was a really hard transition. And I became I got a huge stutter. I became very insecure. I became very withdrawn. And I had a deep period of withdrawal from all of that and turning away. And it really wasn't until college, again, when that opened up again for me, started to open up again.
Why did your parents wait until the fourth grade to put you in traditional school?
Really, it was that the little hippie school I was in closed down. And
Um,
so then the choice was, okay, well, then you'll go to the school that's here. Um, my mom really wanted me to have, in particular, my mom really wanted me to have a really free, wild childhood. Her experience growing up was that she had very strict parents, East Coast, very strict parents who really expected, academics and conformity was everything. And she was told from a very young age, this is what your life was going to look like. And she had a lot of resentments around not having the freedoms to be as she wanted. And so she really wanted my sister and I to have a different experience. It was very hard for me during my, elementary years, later elementary years, and through high school, through middle school. Um, Looking back, I'm very grateful because looking back now through my experiences, now that I've awakened and come into my power, I realized that it did give me a groundwork. Like when I went to school, I realized, oh, I have to put on an act in a way. I have to behave a certain way for society, but this isn't actually the deeper truth. And I didn't, for certain, I wasn't always able to articulate that, but through my life, again, I've known I could do anything. I could just step into any world and create myself to be what needed to happen. So I could, be a scientist, and then I could be a chef and go into that world and just step into it and claim my power and do really well and win a bunch of awards and be successful. And then, oh, I'm going to get an MBA and jump into the business world and then just do that and operate at a very high level. I knew I could just jump into anything and do whatever needed to be done. And it was the doing. It wasn't like I was any of those things. I was just doing them. And as I've opened up, that allowed me a little bit of pause and openness to be, oh, I'm actually none of those things. I'm none of the ways that I act, and I didn't have the language for most of my life, certainly, but now I know, oh, I am my spirit and I can move through the world in any of these ways, right? It gave me my whole life. This gave me that perspective that I was able to use to free myself in a way easier than if I was fully embedded in the ego of my identity of any of those things, right? So I'm grateful looking back for that reason.
What an amazing childhood. But let's bounce back. I'm really curious about. So you're in the corporate world, and but the very, very first time you got a message come through as a medium, were you expecting it? Did it surprise you? Did it freak you out?
So this is going way back. So at this point, I was a scientist. I was a tropical biologist years ago, and I was working in the jungle of Africa for a couple years, in the middle of the jungle, cut off from society. It was a 20-mile hike into the forest after we crossed a river on a dugout canoe, after we drove like a full day on a tiny dirt road, four-wheel drive with ruts to a tiny little village, from the town. We were out there. And we would be out there for months at a time. Somebody from our camp would go to town like every month or so to get supplies and resupply. But any one of us might be out in the jungle for 2, 3 months at a time and not leave. I would receive letters, but otherwise we had no communication. And so it was during that time when one day, I started to have these deep, at the time, it was like thoughts of my grandfather. And I was thinking about him all the time. He was very present for me, and I was like, oh, at the time, I was like, oh, when I get back home, I need to go see him. He lives in Iowa. I lived in California. And for about a week, he was just incredibly present. I recall talking to my friends about it, like, oh, I'm thinking about my grandfather all the time. I need to go see him when I get back. I'm thinking about him. I told some stories about him to my friends, out there. It wasn't until about 6 months later when I went home when I learned that he had died.
Hmm.
And I asked my dad, my dad was like, okay, at grandfather's funeral. And I was like, okay, Dad, when did he die? I didn't know. I didn't know he had passed. And I traced it back exactly to when I had that experience that week of connecting with him. And because, at the time, again, I grew up at that point in my life being a rational scientist. I really thought I was going to continue on the scientific path and be, my goal as a young man was to be a famous, renowned scientist to discover the mysteries of the world kind of thing through rational science. Because I was in the jungle and the way it happened, where I was so cut off from connection, it gave me the opportunity to just like, oh my goodness, I was receiving communication from him. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks and just opened my mind that was what was happening because I couldn't explain it any other way. The coincidence, the quote coincidence of me connecting with him so deeply during that time. And so that just shifted my whole consciousness. A few years later, my great grandmother started to come to me very strongly. And she was this woman that was a very powerful woman. She got a PhD in 1900 from the
Oh,
University of Chicago, which was very rare for a woman at the time. And it was on religious practices of the Native Americans in the Pacific Northwest. So she was studying. She went to the Sorbonne in France, studied there. Very fascinating woman, but she was not allowed to be a professor or have any recognition because she was a woman. So she was coming to me very strongly, and I was on the academic path, and she was trying to. What I learned was she was trying to like open up to this, trying to guide my life to fulfill her unmet needs. And now I see this all the time. I do work with ancestors, but she was coming to me, speaking with me, trying to influence me for her own needs because she was unresolved in her spirit world. And she came very strongly for years and to the point where I couldn't ignore it anymore and finally had to just like, okay, Letitia Moon Connard is her name. I was like, okay, okay, Letitia, I'm going to honor you. I did a ceremony for her publicly and I told her story to a group of people and I asked them all to pray for her and I asked them all to acknowledge her and then I asked her to let me go. I said, please let me go. I'm going to live my life. I can connect with you when you want. Let's be here, but please don't guide me anymore. Please don't like influence me in the way you have been. I am free and I'll set you free. And that came after several years of sort of wrestling with this energy that I felt was influencing me in ways that I was like uncomfortable with as I came into my own awareness. And that experience, so I'm grateful to her. Thank you, Letitia, because she was so insistent with me. It showed me how to work with spirits and energies in a way that opened up that deeper way of like, okay, I can not only hear them, but they can hear me energetically, and we can connect in these ways. And then that opened up the channel with more voices, ancestors, and spirits for myself and other people started to flow in and become a part of my life.
Wow, what an interesting story. That's incredible, huh?
Yeah.
I also read when you were in southern Cameroon in Africa
Yeah.
that you lived with the Baka people. Then they had an effect on you spiritually, or how?
And yes, in a deep and profound way, right? So, part of my spiritual path has been the deepening into non-duality and the union of all things, the connection of all things. That's been a deep, deep part of my spiritual journey. That's a deep part of Taoism. That's a deep part of I had a guru for a while, a tantric Shaivist guru that I lived with for a number of years. But before all that, I was a scientist living in the jungle, and I lived with this indigenous, the Baka tribe. They're these hunter-gatherers that have lived in the forest where I lived, the Congo Basin forest, for forever, since before recorded history. They've always lived there. And I would walk around with them, and they would be my guides through the forest as I was studying the birds and monkeys. And I would sit down and watch the birds or monkeys eat and disperse the seeds for hours or days at a time. We would walk through the forest and record and count the animals and things like that as a scientist. Meanwhile, we were collecting the fruits and the mushrooms and harvesting tubers and honey and all the things, the leaves, and they would tell stories about the forest. And they would use they were very musical, and they would use words like, oh, when we sing with the forest. They would say things like that, just simple little things like that, right? And their whole worldview is one of like, oh, it is not us as humans coming in to study the forest. We are the forest. You know, us, the monkeys, the trees, the water, the sky, everything is. We're all here together in this. And of course, that's so simple and true and obvious, but also it's from a deep Western viewpoint of like there's humanity and then there's nature. We have this deep separation. And it's just 2 years of living with that group, and that perspective just collapsed that for me and opened up this deeper knowingness of union that I didn't have before.
Well, that sounds similar to other indigenous cultures like American Indians or Aborigines. We are the sky, we are the forest. Um,
1,000,000%. Yeah.
yeah.
And this was just, this was the group of people that I happened to live with to give me those perspectives and to share that worldview with me and to tell their stories and to have that seep into me. It came through this pathway for me. Yeah.
Well, you kind of touched on this already, and I mentioned you earlier before we started recording. I'm a longtime 20-year student of A Course in Miracles, and now, your experience of living and understanding a non-dualistic life as a reality. What exactly is non-dualism? Can you explain that for our viewers and listeners?
Yeah. And non-duality is just so some traditions, and I'm not a huge fan of this word because it kind of is dualistic in a way as well, is just like, we're on the spiritual path, and then we have an air quotes enlightenment, and then we move into some other state where everything is bliss and oneness and all that. So broadly, in the most general term, after enlightenment, again, with all the caveats, that might be called non-duality, sort of the awakened state. Um, my Taoist path has taught me, the teachings I received from my Taoist lineage is that in this lineage, there's 12 stages of awakening. And even that's a map, even that's a euphemism. It's just a continuum. But in these 12 stages, it's like, oh, there's 12 stages where we can wake up but still be in duality, where there's me and there's the universe and I'm separate. And as we go into the seventh stage, we drop into the void of all things, where we recognize at the deepest level of our energy and cellular awareness in every moment that there's all one. And it's not a cognitive awareness, it's an experience. And this is where we get into this mystical realm of like, we can talk about it, but we're really pointing to something that we can't quite say until you're there. And this is why there's volumes of poetry and books and whatever from all time and songs speaking to this idea of oneness that we can only aspire to until we're in it. And it's one of these things where you can't do it. You can't get there by doing it. You can experience some corners of this through plant medicines and through transcendent experiences, but those can only draw. Some of those broadly might like uh, open up the doors to experience the unity and oneness of all things, perhaps. But then once that journey ends, you're back into your experience of wherever you were. Um, and for me, it took years of meditation and dropping into the depths of myself, where I would again have these transcendent experiences during that time where I might pop into an awakened state for a second or a minute or whatever time is, and then drop back down. But it wasn't until I really had some more hardships and traumas in my life, and it was, getting divorced in 2018 and separated and feeling that aloneness. And then there were things going on with work that weren't great. And I'd had other experiences earlier on, including what I talked about my childhood and sort of like the trauma of being sort of wild and free and then being fit into society. And a bunch of other things happened where finally in late 2018 was when I just sort of surrendered and said, I can no longer live like this. There's no point. I had this sense of like, if I continue on like this, I'm already dead, not in a nihilistic, like I'm going to kill myself way, but in just like, I felt the hopelessness and the emptiness of continuing on in a very small way. And again, I had already been doing decades of spiritual work, and I had bigger experiences and sort of this ebb and flow of like deeper connection and then disillusionment and withdrawal from those parts of my life. And then, multiple cycles of that. Finally, in 2018, I was just like, okay, I surrender. I surrender to the majesty of the universe. I surrender to the mystery. I surrender to the universe. I surrender to God. I surrender to whatever it might be. I surrender. And just allow that withdrawal, that surrender, and it's a giving up, not in a nihilistic way, but in a affirming way. It's a giving up in a positive way of like, okay, spirit, take me. And that opened up the door to me entering into experiences and the work I've been doing just to like connect with my heart and connect with the love of the universe. And that's been like a tractor beam of expansion and connection ever since. There's been ups and downs even within that. It's not all love and light. There's this ebb and flow, but overall, the path since that surrender has been magnificent.
Yeah, and I was going to ask that when you decided to surrender to the universe and the unity of it, how it affected your life. But you just explained that. It just blossomed.
It just blossomed. And so for me at the time, I was in a period of sort of, I had had some experiences and I was disillusioned at the time. And I was like, I don't want to do spiritual stuff right now. I was in that frame of mind. And I chose actually a men's workshop that the website had nothing spiritual on it at all. But it was just like a brotherhood of men. I had a breakup, divorce, and I was like, okay, I want to get deeper with my men brothers and like have that experience of brotherhood. And went to this workshop a few months later after that sort of experience of after that the decision point of waking up and surrendering. I went to a men's workshop, and during that workshop, we ended up doing some somatic work together, somatic like in the body outside of the story. And what happened was that I ended up finding my heart in that weekend, in that weekend of brotherhood, finding my heart. And like, I remember this experience of pulling my heart out of a cave in my chest and pulling my heart on this big chain, energetically, metaphorically, visually, like back into my body and back into connection. And from that moment, from that weekend of like finding my heart space again, that's when really like the deeper magic of just like the rapture of connection and the spiritual blossoming unfolded. Again, ironically, air quotes, like I wasn't looking for the spiritual connection with that workshop, and but still the surrender and openness to whatever might come next just blossomed from there. And then I had a deep period of like expansion of my energy. Sometimes, I was just crying with joy. The light was so bright as I entered into it. And then there were also periods of like, there was a clarity that would come to me that felt very empty. It wasn't all love and light. There was moments of like deep emptiness and clarity, which I was like, but this is not like depression I knew when I was younger, because that's really sort of heavy and dark and sticky for me, and kind of like depression is like very heavy and empty, maybe. This clarity I was feeling was like very empty and disconnected, dispassionate, but also very light and spacious. and that happened for a number of months, and I was feeling a little bit not so great during that period, frankly. And then one morning I woke up early and I connected with the sunrise. And the sun in this morning just felt like so deeply glorious, I couldn't stand it. And my connection with the energies of the rays of the light of the sun and the warmth just like put me into this, ecstatic state of connection and rapture. This was now in 2020, so a while later of writing more experiences. And I remember this is when I remember feeling like the air around me was just like vibrating with energy and connection and potency and this crystalline structure of order in the universe that I was a part of and one with. And time became apparent to me that it was like this magical, silly putty matrix of experience that I could manipulate as I wished. And that's been my experience ever since that moment was like, certainly you have a watch on, like I know what watch time is, and I understand that we can flow with that if we need to, but that's a construct, and that truly time is this 3D matrix of choice about how we want to interface with the flow of this universe. But like it's not really who I am on a soul level at all. Yeah.
It's interesting because I was going to ask you if living a non dualistic life, is it similar to being in the now moment? Because you realize that time is an illusion, right?
That's right. And so here's this paradox because I'm not pretending at all that it's all bliss, but there's a nowness. And then, I have to drive somewhere and have an appointment, whatever. But what I do, frankly, is I set my alarm all the time in reminders because I know that I can easily at any moment get into the now moment and then time might go by and so like for this podcast, I made sure I set an alarm and I was aware so I wouldn't have to stay focused in a way on the clock and I could just be in my morning. And then when this happened, I was ready. So there's a lot of that. So there are times when it's useful and appropriate to feel the duality and to walk through life with the clarity of like the meanness to do something, you know? And then I define like the non-duality. There's all kinds of experiences. Certainly there are many, in my view is that there's many levels even within non-duality of a deepening of experience for sure. So there are many beings that I know, and this is beautiful, that have, a much deeper nowness where they are just in the present all the time on this level. So I never met the man, but I met Ram Dass and, his guru, Neem, Neem, Neem Curly Baba. I know, from the stories of him is that he could teleport different places and create food out of thin air and was always just present and loving and laughing. He would show up whenever he was needed, kind of thing. These magical stories of him. Well, so that's a being in non-duality that I believe from the stories would be at some level where they're so in the now that they can be everywhere at once and do everything. So that's not my experience, but it's close to that, but it's not that. It's a different experience where I still do get pulled into duality sometimes, and that's beautiful in the flow to do things. But then I sit down and just breathe, and then here I am in the vastness of time, and I open up time portals to do my work with ancestors, for example, and I'm just here flowing with the energy, and it's beautiful. The beauty is not that it's anything; it's that it's everything. Everything is so contained in the nowness that like the beauty is like it's all happening, even the bad quote bad stuff, the good stuff, the future, the past. It's so vast. There's nothing to do but laugh at it because like what else is there to do? It's so delicious, so vast that it contains everything. So we can just sit and smile and laugh at the beauty of it and say, "Wow, how magic is this?" It's like that.
I hear Ram Dass speaking through you right now. As you
Oh. I sat with him only once in 1993. And just a few months before that, I was traveling in Belize I was going down to do some work in Costa Rica and I was traveling overland down through Belize. And at the time, I actually, like my friends and I was traveling with some friends. We met this young Rasta guy and we smoked these massive joints in Belize City, got really, really high and sat down in this guy's hut. And I had a really powerful out of body experience where I like floated up into the sky and I wanted to keep going into the vastness of space. And I realized like, oh, I'm really high on this joint and I don't know where I actually am. It's nighttime in some little hut in Belize. My friends are also high as heck. I don't know if I'm safe to go and explore farther. And I was like blasted back into my body. I collapsed into my body. I look up and I look around, and my friends are all sort of spaced out in their own realm. And I look down, and right next to me on the ground was the copy of Be Here Now, Ram Dass's book. In this little hut in the jungle. I had never seen the book before. I didn't know about the book, and I opened it up. And for those of you who know this book, if you don't, go buy it. If you do know it, you know it's like full of these magical drawings and pictures and words, large tech words of like spirit and connection and truth, this deep transmission of the experience of truth. And that book just entered me like a transmission from the gurus. About 6 months later or so, Ram Dass was passing through San Diego where I lived, and I went and sat with him and received his blessing, his transmission, learned meditation, and received just the energy of that transmission. I never sat with him again, and yet he's never left me as a strong influence in spirit. And now that he's passed, he's even with me even stronger for sure.
Well, I think, being a student of A Course in Miracles, and A Course in Miracles is all about non dualism existence. And I think the hardest part is when you like go down to the street corner and talk to the man on the street, despite the awakening of the population in the world more than ever, there's still a vast majority of the world. You say, hey, man, we're all unified. It's all one. And they're like, yeah, right. I got to go make my mortgage payment.
Right. That's right. The most powerful teaching. So I love the Course of Miracles. It's, I love there's this Tibetan Tantra that I read recently, actually, which I really love. And it's a quote from that is that really sits with me deeply is like a bee will find nectar from all kinds of flowers. Receive the teachings from wherever you go. Right? Receive the
Yeah.
teachings from wherever you go. And so I love the true teachings from whatever tradition I can find. I love to study them and learn about them and receive. And within all teachings, I believe, within all traditions, my experience is there's some of parts of the texts that are sort of more background, introductory, sort of like details and setting up the stage. And then we have these nuggets of like deep transmission of truth. And then there's more sort of background and stories and whatever. And then there's these nuggets of just like these zingers of like, okay, this paragraph is just like this direct transmission of everything. One of those from the Course of Miracles is the responsibility prayer. Are you familiar with that?
I'm sure I've read it, but just I can't think of it offhand.
Yeah. So the responsibility prayer in Course of Miracles, and this is not a quote, I'm actually in the flow and I don't think I'm going to get this right, but basically it says, mm, whatever happens to you, everything that happens to you comes to you as you ask, and you receive it exactly as you wish. So everything that appears to happen to you comes to you as you ask, and you create your world. So we are all individually entirely responsible for our experience. We are all entirely and completely responsible for our experience, and the world will appear to us as we wish entirely. So that isn't a quote. That's a deep paraphrase of that, and I encourage everyone to look that up. Um, that hit me about approximately 5 years ago or so. I read that, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks as like this deep transmission, and I received it, and like almost instantly, I would relate to. At the time, I was working in a job where my boss and I were friendly, but during meetings, there was always some tension, and she wanted me to do things a certain way. And I was like, yeah, but there was always this back and forth. It wasn't a huge problem. It was just sort of a medium problem, I'll say, right? And I just walked into the next meeting, and I was like, I just energetically owned everything and took responsibility for my performance, for what was happening in the company, in my role, for how she related to me, that I could be responsible for it and that she would show up as I needed right then. And I just had that perspective and went into the meeting knowing that that was true, that how she related to me, which again, I had this history of, a year or two of her being a little bit confrontational and telling me to do things differently was my like bias. And I just own, oh, that might have been my experience, but I'm going to own that how she shows up will be exactly what I need and I can create this. And immediately the meeting was like entirely different. And we worked collaboratively. And it was like, oh, Aaron, how can we work together to solve this problem? My whole experience just shifted on a dime. And, I picked that meeting at work because, it wasn't my deepest trauma that I had to work through. It was one that was a smaller energetic level, but it resolved instantly. And I saw it and I recognized it. And I realized, oh, these deeper ones might take more time, but I can work to create this world. In fact, I am creating the world, and I just need to align my inner self with the world I want to create, and it will appear for me. And that has come true in ways large and small, in ways that are magical and deep and profound ever since. And before I stop, I just want to, this is really the magic of this belief is not in the thinking, it's in the integration with our energetic bodies, with our heart space, believing it from the depths of our integration. And the more we're aligned with our beliefs, the more that this comes true. So this touches on this new age idea of manifestation. The more that we're aligned with our intentions, with our actions, with our dreams, all of it lined up, that's when the magic unfolds around us and we receive everything as we wish. And we do receive everything as we wish when we aren't aligned, but it looks different from what we might expect because other parts of our energy are creating things for us to reflect where we truly are, not where we want to be in our fantasies. So
I think one of the things talking about, we create our own reality and our own life, and we are responsible for what we see, is very difficult for the modern world, many people in the modern world to absorb, because most people have a victim mentality. It's not my fault, it's your fault. And so when you tell them, well, I'm sorry, it's all one, it really is. But the thing is, quantum science, actually, because most of the world is saying, I'll believe it when I see it. Well, quantum science is providing that they've already showed that there's only a unified field, and that the quote vacuum in space, Lynn McTaggart writes about this, is actually nothing but a maelstrom of vibrating energy elements. And so, yeah, to people who want to be able to believe it when they see it, well, take that. Quantum science has already shown it. It is a unified field.
and I think that it is important to say, and like from Taoism, there's always this dual perspective, right? In Taoism, there's always a yin and a yang. There's always an active element and a passive element. There's always a light and a dark, right? And all of us have seen that picture that shows the light and the dark together, with the light and the dark and the dark and the light, those little fish. And that's how it is. There's always these two perspectives that we hold simultaneously to be true at the same time. So on the individual small I level, I have deep compassion for all the suffering of all the individuals in the world. And I just heard recently that there's 33 wars right now happening in the world. That's a number I heard recently. I haven't verified that. But regardless, that's a lot of suffering for people that might not individually feel at all in control of that. And I respect that, and all kinds of other traumas that are happening on a daily basis across the globe. And on those individual moments for those people, I have deep compassion, deep sorrow, and awareness that people are trapped in circumstances, quote, where they feel out of control. And then there's this perspective of non-dual union, which says everything truly is in the perfection of oneness, not perfection of goodness or whatever. It's just perfection of it is what it is. And that is perfect in the grand scheme of things from the soul level, in the vastness of time. And from that perspective, there's a perfection where even our souls come to earth. This is what I'm shown from my guides and angels. Our souls come to earth to experience the traumas, because we don't get that when we're at the universal oneness level of all things. When we're a soul united with God, when we're a soul united with the vastness of the universe, we can't experience the beauty of our situation because we are everything already. So our souls actually crave the difference. So we crave, and again, with all respect to individuals suffering right now on the individual level, from the larger perspective, our souls are craving the separation, the traumas, and these experiences of deep antithesis of that union, so that they can appreciate the union as we return back into it.
Well, that sounds like the process of enlightenment over massive number of lifetimes, right?
So that's exactly it. And so just as each individual one of us has this journey from being small to awakening, our collective of souls also wants to experience that same journey, and so because it's all one thing, whether we like the word God or universe or the universal spirit or all of those things are all playing this game, this illusion, this fun journey of experiencing the separation to experience the joy of reconnection and the swirling experience of it is the dark that creates the light, that creates the dark, that creates the union, that creates the 10,000 things, that creates this moment.
Just to remind people, we are talking to the amazing Aaron French, and some incredible stories about becoming a medium and all these other experiences. Did I read that you also channel?
I do, yeah. And I want to be clear, people use that word in different ways. Um, I don't have a single or a single constellation of beings that come through me on a regular, always, as some channels do. And what I have is as I open up a variety of excuse me, a variety of energies choose to come through at different times. So, I do channel, Jesus comes through for me. Mary comes through. Shiva, I was in this tradition of Kashmiri Shaivism, a Shivite tradition. So I received messages from Shiva and Saraswati from that lineage, as well as like some really old European energies. Ouroboros is this really, really old spirit energy god of the snake eating its own tail, or sometimes a dragon in an infinity sign. There's a variety, which, is deeply embedded into all the old Christian texts. The illuminated Bibles and texts from Christianity have this symbol throughout as well, but it predates all of those religions. Very, very old spirit comes through and speaks. Babaji sometimes comes through and speaks to me and gives me guidance. Yeah, so a variety of energies come through. And they're sometimes they come through for the service of one individual I'm working with, and sometimes they come through for messages that I share with humanity, just messages of love and connection and guidance for the times that we're in with this unfolding universe that we're in this moment.
I've had a number of trans channels on here, and do you remember?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm not a trance channel. For me, I'm fully lucid as these come through. So for me, it's largely claircognizance and also I receive sometimes it's words and transmissions of words, but it's often this pushed experience of images, which then I put words to. So I get these messages through knowing, or these messages pushed through image stories, these sort of universes of images of how things are that then I translate. So a few years ago, for example, when it was all in the news that the Amazon was burning like crazy. This was a handful of years ago. It's still happening, but it was in the news a lot, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And I received fully lucid. I received this full transmission of the connection through our hearts, this golden light through all of us. And then it zoomed out and showed me the light through the earth to all the other planets and stars and beings in the cosmos at large. And then it zoomed back in just so I would really receive that, like, the light love connection through all of us is universal. And it zoomed out to the cosmos, zoomed into our hearts again, zoomed into our cells, and showed us the oneness of the light pattern of loving connection through our individual cells, us in the room connection, our hearts as people, zoomed out to the earth and all the grid on the earth, zoomed out to the universe and the connection of all of it. And then it zoomed into the Amazon and it showed me the burning. And then the message was like, yes, there's suffering, but it's okay. Not it's okay that we're burning down our earth. It's okay that the world and the universe as a whole is taking care of itself, and it will self-regulate. And we're all here in so much love and so much vastness that on the macro level, there's just goodness, and you don't need to suffer about it right now. You don't need to worry about it. Just like grow into your love. And by healing ourselves, we truly will heal the world and share this message, for example. And that was all given to me as images that then I've put these words to, for example. So that's.
I love every bit about that too. Well, one thing, Aaron, we do need to talk about is you are an Akashic Records reader. What exactly are the Akashic Records, and how does one access it?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. And for me, I know that there's a variety of ways that people can talk about this and a variety of ways people can enter them. So I'll just share my experience primarily is I see everything as vibration and energy. And vibrational energy has awareness. It has messages. It has meaning in vibration. You know, as humans, we know that we're mostly empty space and vibrational energy, all of us, right? And trees are the same. Trees are alive and communicate with us because they have a vibrational energy which we can also receive. And so I say all that. And then the second piece of information that's important to hold in space is that all time is now, as we talked about. There's only this moment. And in the human experience, we create time so we can move through it. And I've been shown specifically we create time so we can move through it so that we can have the experience of separation and pain and suffering so that we can appreciate the reconnection. Because if there's no time, we can't experience the journey of reconnection with spirit. Right. So that's why we create time to have the experience of connection and get back to it. So all time is now. And then all experience is a vibrational frequency. And so all of us humans are created, and other plants and animals and everything as well, actually, create this vibrational energy web, which then floats up. And just like a campfire sometimes, or clouds, we'll see through a temperature grid might form a flat little like layer of smoke that we can see. And it's because of temperature gradients like that. I see it as like energetic vibrations where there's a layer of vibrational energy where the information of all of our human vibrations and meaning across all time are held. And so people say this is a library of information, and I think that's true, but it's a vibrational band wherein, again, because all time is now, it's all right here, and it's for all people across all time because we're all here and we're all one. And so I just like tune my radio, if you will, up to this vibrational frequency of this band of information, and then I search based on the conversation I have with you before I enter the records for you. I'll figure out what is your purpose, for this session, what are you looking for, what's your energy right now, where are you on your journey, and then go up to receive information which will elucidate and clarify and activate you right now to deepen on your path. That's how I work. Now, for me too, just below that realm of the Akashic field, for me, the way I experience it, just below that is where the angels and guides and other beings exist and come through to me. And there, if they want to speak to me, they just once I tune into that band, they just push their messages to me and I receive them sort of in an active way in service of you if I'm working with you. When I tune up to the Akashic field, that's this field of information of all things where then I need to retrieve and ask the questions energetically in service for you. Because it's so vast, I could just read whatever, but it's like, okay, what's going to be useful for you and actionable for you and activating for you and clarifying for you right now in this moment.
I think for me, the image, and I'm sure people have a lot of people have this image of the Akashic Records. There's this ancient man with a really long beard and a robe, and there's infinite rows and rows of bookshelves all the way off into infinity. And you come to him and would you like me to open your records? But people can actually come to you for an Akashic reading.
Absolutely. And I do this in person where I am in Tahoe, but I'm in a small town. So it works perfectly across Zoom, right? Just like right now, we're having this great conversation. I do most of my work on Zoom, and the energetic presence of all time and place. I feel your energy. I can do energy healings with you, enter the Akashic fields with you and pull down the information. I look forward to doing readings in that same space. For me, they spill into each other. So I might also receive messages from your spirit guides or your ancestors if they want to come through as I'm entering the records. They like the spirit guides and angels. If they want to speak for you, they come in so quick when I'm first working with you. I'm like, wait a minute, I need to finish this conversation, and then you can come speak through me. So for me, the readings, I can call them Akashic readings or mediumship readings, and really they sort of spill over into each other. Is how it works for me. But really, all of whatever comes through, my filter is just one of service and activation and alignment with your spirit purpose. So there are other people that might, if you're just curious about like all your past lives or whatever, there are people that can just like give you that, a lifetime of past lives or whatever that might be. I do get all that information and I share that with you. But really, it's like, is this information of this past life going to unlock something in you right now that's useful? That's what comes through with me. What's useful for you right now?
Phenomenal, boy. So I may have to book a session with you sometime.
I would love that. It'd be an honor.
So, Aaron Frenchy was you've been a chef, a photographer, a corporate guy, a medium, an Akashic Records, a psychic. Wow. Yeah. I think I even saw on Amazon you have some cookbooks that you wrote.
I do. Yeah, there you go. You Googled around. Thank you for that. Yeah, I wrote I wrote a cookbook for a while, and really, looking back, my whole career, quote, career of all these things, I always felt like, as I mentioned earlier, I could step into any world and do pretty well. Um, but I could do anything because none of that was my purpose. So I could put on any suit, if you will, and like do whatever needed to be done and have fun with it, which I did. And then it was just in the last handful of years, as I've deepened and stepped and claimed this is my power that I was really shown. The reason I could do those things throughout my whole life was because this is the time of activation, and I chose this soul incarnation now to be here now to do this work now. And so up to that point, I was free to do whatever with my sole purpose because I was waiting for this shift of the energy, these last handful of years and going forward of this awakening, this mass awakening, to be able to share these messages and share this message of healing and activation and awakening and deepening with all of you, to work with people who are activated now so that we can again activate those next generation and keep this going. So this is my time of purpose. And before that, I could do anything. And I did basically. And now I'm clear, like, this is what I'm doing forevermore. Like, this is my purpose, whether it's a spiritual mentor. I also work with you one-on-one, people one-on-one, to guide them into non-duality, to support their activation and transmit this with non-duality, support that journey, as well as the mentorship, as well as the mediumship and Akashic readings and things like that as well.
Well, and on top of all of that, I see a gong behind you. You do sound healing, right?
I do. And again, everything is vibration. And so these gongs, for example, this one, you see those symbols around the side. Well, those symbols are actually time, the runes of time of the year. So this
Oh,
is a gong, a time portal. Over here, I have a gong that has symbols I created with the gong maker to help me, to support the portal into accessing all realms. And I have a gong, it's called Gaia Creation. I have a creation gong, so I use these gongs. They're powerful portals of energy and intention. And when I do sound healings, I use these energies. Yeah, I see that. I saw that immediately behind you. Exactly. I use them as energetic portals and alignments, and these sessions are really, really powerful. So I love going around and bringing my gongs and other sound healing instruments. And, it's a way for people to receive these vibrational frequencies beyond the mind, beyond words. And it can really shift people's perspectives and energies without even having to have a conversation. Powerful.
that is so cool because I've had Eileen McCusick on here who
Okay.
is creator of biofield tuning, and I had her on the show, and I bought one of their tuning forks, and she uses it to heal, you
Yeah.
know,
A
and
million percent. There's so many modalities. The
aim it up.
gongs I love. They're so deep and transformative and powerful. Tuning forks. I have crystal pyramids. All the frequency ranges. I have small little bells I use. Small to big, different. Crystal, metal, different tools, wood, flutes. They all carry vibrational frequencies, and the gongs can be really deep and shake things up for us. And then you go in there with a bell or a crystal to clarify and straighten, and then do it again. There's these technologies to weave through these different frequency bands to really activate what needs to happen for the people or people in the room. Yeah, really
Well,
powerful.
this has been a phenomenal talk. We're going to wind up here, but
Thank you.
one thing I would like to finish up. As you know, humankind is living in a very, very unique time of awakening and to move into its true reality and ascension. Why do you think that's happening now?
I mean, I think the why is an interesting question. I mean, I think it's just we're here now. I would turn it around and say those of us who are alive now are choosing to be here now because this is a time of awakening, right? These traditions say, many traditions across the world say that we have these cycles of separation and cycles of coming back together. And that's true with the Vedic, the yugas, these massive cycles of time, with the Mayan calendars, with Native American traditions, with many traditions around the globe. There are these appreciation that there are times of awakening and times of separation. And we're right now on the inflection point of awakening. So depending on, the different calendars are lined up almost the same, but the cycles of time are so big that whether it's this year or 5 years ago or 10 years from now, it's all the same thing in, 100-year cycle, or when we're talking about, hundreds of thousands of year cycles of energy, a few years is all the same. So we're on this inflection point going from this period of decline and separation to this period of awakening and unfolding right now. My parents' generation, they didn't have the connection that we have now. And certainly, again, there was much more separation a generation ago, and now there's this awakening and flowering. It's also chaotic. These changes of energy mean that there's more chaos right now as we shift into this new era of opening. That means we have to shift and shake up and change the institutions and the cultural ideas and our whole perspectives of how things were. We have to let go of those as things move forward. And so through that time, it's messy and it can be hard for people. And it's inevitable and so present. We're all feeling it. The palpability of those of us who are awake, feeling this rise of energy is magnificent. And I'm shown, right now there's a deep backlog of souls on a waiting list, if you will, wanting to come to Earth right now, which is why I'm also told there's so many people on Earth right now, because we all want to be here for this moment of transition. It's so exciting for our souls to be here right now.
There's some more Ram Dass coming through. Be here now. We are here now.
We are here. We are. It's so beautiful.
Well, with that, Aaron, what is the best way for people to connect with you? What's your website?
Yeah, thank you so much. So my website is naturalheartalchemy.com. And that's the same as my Instagram, Natural Heart Alchemy. Natural Heart Alchemy, all one word for both. And, my programs are all there and things like that. My Instagram, I share channeled messages as they come through and different things that want to be spoken through that. I also, offer my programs there and things like that. So I'd love to connect with you in either place. And if you feel at all called, reach out. We can have a free one-on-one consultation and just see how we fit together and how we can work together.
Yeah, and I will put those links in the show notes so people can access it and everything. Aaron French, what you are doing, just love every bit of it. You are a beacon of light to the world, and thank you. The classic line, but it's worth it. I love saying it. Namaste.
Namaste. It's been such a joy. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for the work you're doing and the space you hold and this podcast and the light it brings. And until next time, it's been a joy.
This has been another episode of World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with host Carl Gruber, a certified law of attraction life coach. We welcome you to tune in to each and every episode of World Awakenings as we open your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to the truth of all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how much they play an all-important role in our moment-to-moment daily life. Much love and light to you, my friend, and thank you for tuning into World Awakenings.